everyone. There are only 7 days left until Halloween and I have not decorated the inside of my house at all. Pretty early on we did the outside, really fun and festive, and I think the trick-or-treaters are really gonna love it. But we're having some people over to like pass out candy and make some themed cocktails with, and the space inside doesn't feel creepy or spooky at all. And I really wanna bring some like affordable but like elevated vibes into this space because I'm always on a budget. So I went through my DIY drawers in the garage and tried to pull together everything that I could get in order to make some really fun DIY Halloween decor that maybe you could try at home and that we could talk about together. So let's jump into it and let me show you project number 1. So for the first project, I'm going to use some public domain art, and I picked these two because I thought that they were really interesting and kind of looked spooky on their own. And I also picked these ones because they had people in them, and that's going to make it really easy to use these paint Sharpies to draw little ghosts over the people so I get the proper perspective and just like angles, I guess. I think it adds art to your space, but it also has that Halloween vibe because there's little ghosts on it. And then I picked up these two frames from the Dollar Tree a while ago, and on one of them the glass broke, so I thought I could merge the two by gluing one on the top and kind of making it feel like a thicker, like vintage gold frame. So I just used some E6000 glue and put it all around the edges and then just let it sit for a couple hours so that it fully dried. You could use hot glue, but I just didn't want to risk it oozing out of the sides as I wanted it to look like one full piece. And then I got some of this Mod Podge in the matte finish, and I'm just taking a chip brush and kind of creating a lot of different brush strokes on here. However, I would recommend you use a sponge brush as I do that on my second one, and I think it comes out a lot better. The point here is to give it that old world painting look because I just printed this out from my regular printer, so if we just left it that way, it would look kind of cheap in my opinion. And so for our second piece, I wanted to add some bats on here in like kind of a creepy way coming over the mountains, but I don't have a stencil or a Cricut or anything like that, so I just put the bat picture behind the actual painting that I want to use and put it up to the window and use that as like a tracing light box. And I think it turned out really great. So I really wanted to use one of the paint Sharpies as I feel like they give a really nice painted finish. However, it had much more of a blunt tip and I needed something sharper to draw these really tiny small bats so the perspective felt right. So I just used a regular Sharpie, and I think after painting over it with the Mod Podge, it really helped. When it finally dries, it has a really great texture and feels like a painting, and if you put it in a frame without glass, I think it really looks like a piece of art. For the second project here, I went to the thrift store looking for something else, and I came across this bowl and I thought it had a really great shape to it. So I just brought it home and I'm going to spray paint it with this really nice matte hammered spray. It kind of gives that like cast iron cauldron type feel with the texture and the color. And I think even just leaving it like this is super great and it looks really nice. And I think this could be a really easy and affordable way to create like a cute candy bowl. However, I wanted to pencil on something a little bit more Halloween. So I just wrote out the letters RIP with little periods in between and then traced over it with one of the black paint Sharpies, and I really liked the way that it looked. And if you wanted to replicate this at home, you could draw spiders, bats, tombstones, happy Halloween, whatever might suit your interests. I just ended up drawing my own little spider web on the side and adding a spider with a little red back on it, and I thought this was a great way to create a fun, elevated decor piece that doesn't feel super cheesy. So this next project is really fun. We're just going to use some cheesecloth. You can get this from any like hobby or craft store, even the Dollar Tree for like $1. And you just want to spread it out and pull it until it's like 1 or 2 sheets thin. And then I'm going to put some cold brew coffee in a bowl here with some water. And we're just going to kind of soak it and try to change the color. So we want this to look really aged and old. And I'm going to try to emulate like a mummy wrap kind of thing. So I'm just going to let it dry outside after soaking it in the coffee solution. And then once we bring it inside after it's dry, inside, you can see that it's like a lot creamier and darker than the actual original white piece of cheesecloth. And I forgot to say this, but you really don't need too much for this specific craft. So you're just gonna lay it out on the table, and then we're just gonna cut some strips here to kind of emulate some mummy bandages. And you can do really rough cuts. I think the more rough and like jagged it looks and the more ripped that it gets, the better. And then I grabbed 2 of these little glass votive things from the Dollar Tree, as well as this spray glue is also from the Dollar Tree. So I'm just gonna spray the votive and then start layering on my strips. I think it's important to cover up the entire thing, including the bottom, because that's going to give it the full effect. So the cheesecloth can be a little bit delicate to work with. It is pretty thin, but just keep layering it over and over again, and that's really going to give us that really interesting 3D effect. Even if parts of the cheesecloth are getting rolled up and bunched up, I think that just adds to the look. If you've got some loose areas of cheesecloth or your hands are getting too sticky to press it into the votive, just use some of the spray glue as some hairspray and pat it down that way. But just be careful to not spray any glue inside the votive. I also wanted to add a little bit more aging to the cheesecloth, so I just put some of this cold brew inside of this little mister and just sprayed it on certain areas. I will say though, it didn't show up immediately as a lot darker. However, the more I let it dry, the darker it got. So I want to make a wreath because I love doing that for the holidays, and I got this one at a thrift store last year, but I don't like all the flowers and stuff on it, so I took those off and it left this really interesting base. But I think it just needed something else to make it feel a little bit more full. So I'm going to use one of those Trader Joe's brooms that I picked up in one of my last videos, and this one's kind of lost its cinnamon scent, and just take off all of the jute cord. And then I'm going to separate all the twig pieces individually, and then I'm going to break off all of the thicker stick pieces and put those in a separate pile for maybe like a future DIY. So now we're left with these really wispy pieces, and I want to just add those to the base of this wreath. I'm going to continue to build on this like circular pattern that it has, and I'm not going to use any hot glue or any ties to connect these little wispy pieces to the top of the wreath. It's pretty easy just to stick them in between the twigs that are already there. And now that it feels a lot more full and a lot more wreath-like, I really like the natural look of it, but I want to take it outside and spray it with some of this matte black spray paint. It'll make it look really creepy and also act as an adhesive to keep all the twigs together. And I think you could even make a gradient with the tips being a little bit more of the natural color, and it would still be just as cool. So for the final project here, I'm going to use some of that jute cord from the cinnamon broom and make a garland. So I got these cute little cookie cutters off of Amazon for like $5 at some point, and they have like a cute little black cat and a pumpkin and kind of like a Snapchat ghost, as well as this really cute little bat. So I'm going to bring back some of this Crayola air dried clay. It's really easy to use, and I'm going to take out about a handful. I don't want to take out too much, otherwise it's going to dry before I actually get to use it. And then I'm just going to squeeze it into a ball and warm it up and try to get all the air bubbles out. And then I'm going to roll it out as if it was just cookie dough. I just want to make sure that every side is kind of equal. I want it to be about like a 1/4 inch to even a 1/2 inch thick on every side, so each piece is going to be the same level of thickness. It's easy for air dried clay things to break if like one side is super thin and the other side is super thick. There's also air bubbles that will come up in there, so it's just better to keep rolling until you don't see any creases or air bubbles and everything feels like it's the same level of thickness. And then we'll just get started with cutting out our shapes. So on the cookie cutter, one side is actually sharp and the other side is dull, so make sure you're using the sharp side, and you're just going to press this in super hard, and I would add as many as you can to one little piece of clay. And then the best way to remove the cutter is to just use 2 hands so that you don't rip the little cutout, and then you just carefully peel away all the extra clay. And then I use the tip of a paintbrush to just create little holes in all of these, and then made sure that the jute cord would actually fit inside of it. And then I just put these on a cutting board and let them dry outside for about 2 days or so, and then I spray painted them with a coat of matte black spray paint. And I just made sure to get every edge of this, and then once those were dry, I flipped them over and spray painted the back. And then I brought them inside once they were dry, got a piece of tape and wrapped it around the end of the jute cord just so that it was easier to string through each one of these pieces. And then I just strung the cord through each one of the ornaments, and because the jute cord was so thick, they stayed in place and I didn't have to keep them there with a knot. And then I added a knot to the end of each cord just to make sure they wouldn't fall off. Well, I really love how those all came out, and I think all together they kind of make this like really macabre scene, and it doesn't feel like cheesy Halloween. It kind of feels really elevated and cool, which I absolutely love, and it's exactly what I was going for. So I'm happy about that because these projects were like so easy and super budget friendly. So I definitely think if you wanted to try any of these at home, I would highly encourage it. And if you wanted to use any of the products that I did, I'll link them down in the description below. And if you ever do end up making something that I put in a video, I always link my email down there as well, so you could always send me a picture or something. I think that would be super fun. But other than that, I will see you guys next week, and happy Halloween. Bye guys.